and welcome to the Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. This week I'm talking to Dani Watson about her stunning landscapes. Dani turns these photographs into artworks that capture the essence of the scene that's in front of her. She started out as a professional tennis coach, and it was an unintentional, somewhat accidental career path which began with an introduction to DSLR camera course at Michael's Camera Store in Melbourne, which started her on her photography journey. After enrolling in a swag of new courses over the next few weeks to learn as much as she could about photography, Dani joined a few landscape photographers on a tour to the Great Ocean Road, and that really sparked the interest in landscape photography. After a chance meeting with Ken Duncan at the Langham Hotel, Dani decided to give up her former life as a tennis coach. She had a point of difference in her sporting career holding a degree, so she enrolled in a photography degree at RMIT University. She's worked with Ken Duncan, OAM, as his assistant, travelled with Ray Martin. We discuss how growing up on a farm has influenced her art, how and why she started her degree, along with a host of other topics. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, Dani. Great to have you on the podcast. How are you going?
Yeah, I'm very well. And yourself?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Finally out of lockdown, which is nice. Managed to get out and shoot this weekend for the first time in 116 days. So.
Oh, you're lucky. I love lockdown so much that I left New South Wales, and the day that you guys came out of lockdown was the day that I finished quarantine here in Victoria to be in further lockdown. So yeah, so I feel like I'm the expert at lockdown from being in Victoria last year to New South Wales and now back in Victoria again.
You sound like a glutton for punishment.
Absolutely, but it gives me time to get things done and work on my own work. So yeah, it's one of those things. I'm not real. I don't see it as a negative. It just gives me a bit more time.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I'm really pleased to have you on the show. I've been looking at some of your work recently, and very happy that you said yes to coming on. I guess what? How would you describe your photography?
I would describe my photography as a work in progress. So I've come out of studying photography at a university level, so at RMIT, and at RMIT I learned a lot of different genres, and that I think has given me a good foundation to sort of take the next step within the industry. But in terms of my own sort of style, it's definitely a work in progress, and I do float between multiple genres and see how I can combine genres together to create a style that's perhaps unique to me. So I feel like it's a work in progress, but it's definitely my passion is landscape, but I also do a lot of other type of photography as well. So whether that be architecture, portraiture, whatever it is that I'm needed to do, but passion definitely lies in landscape.
Right. So I guess rewind before RMIT and before formal education around photography. What made you get into it? What made you pick up a camera? When did you pick up your first camera?
So I picked up a camera in mid-2016. So prior to that, I worked as a professional tennis coach. So I was on court 7 days a week, pretty much almost 365 days a year. And it just became a point where I was burnt out and I needed a break. So in mid-2016, I decided I was going to take a break for 3 months. And 3 months within that time period, I decided that I'd been going to all these places overseas and not really knowing much about photography, but I wanted to take photos. So I went out and bought my first DSLR from Michael's camera store in Melbourne. And when you buy a new camera there, one of the perks is that they give you a free introduction to photography. And so I went along to one of those workshops to learn how to use the camera, and walking out of that one-day workshop, I was hooked. So it was, I came home and I wanted to put into practice everything that I'd learned in that day. And one of my first photos was actually working on a farm. We had a Kelpie pup, and I took a photo which I kind of think is almost the iconic image for me and the image of how I got started. And I think I've actually left it on my Instagram feed, the very first photo. And that photo went a little bit viral. And then I kind of went, oh, photography's easy. And
Instagram's easy.
Instagram's easy. And but I guess, like, my sport background is I'm quite competitive, and we in tennis we had this philosophy of best practice, and so I wanted to learn from the best. And through that next 3 months, I went and learned from a lot of the photographers that I regarded as some of the best in the country. So whether that be Kieran Stone, Ken Duncan, even local guys like Adam Dyson, I was jumping in on workshops to learn from those guys. And whilst in the beginning I had no idea what I was doing, bit by bit, and just jumping in those workshops, and those guys were amazing and answered all my questions. And I'm still very apologetic to those guys in how many questions I probably asked them in the beginning, but they pretty much made me love photography and loved being in the outdoors. And then I gave up tennis. So my 3 months turned into 6 months, and within that 6-month break, that was when I enrolled into formal education. So did I think RMIT were going to accept me? You had to submit a portfolio of work, and I was very raw. And I laugh now when I look at, even recently, I looked at the 10 images that I submitted and to get into RMIT, and I cringe a little bit at those 10 images, but I see it as a starting point. And yeah, I'm very much very thankful to a lot of the photographers that sort of helped inspire me in the beginning, and then even now. So those guys I'm still really close with, and I still chat to them quite often, or go out shooting with them, or whatever it might be. And that's what I love about photography. It's that community kind of feel that you meet new people, and yeah, it's very inclusive, and I think that's very unique to photography.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'd like to explore the process and progress through RMIT a little bit. One of the things that I've spoken to a few of my guests about is that formal versus self-education, and different things work for different people, obviously, and different people learn in different ways. I guess, what was it about the RMIT courses, or the course that you chose? How did you go about looking for it? What did you find out about it before you started, and what drew you into it, I guess?
Yeah, so RMIT wasn't actually the first one that I applied for. My family's farm is fairly close to Geelong, in Victoria. So I actually applied for Deakin University, which is in Geelong, and that was a Bachelor of Photography, and I was accepted into that pretty early. So similar kind of process. You submit a portfolio of work, and I got an offer, and I actually accepted the offer, but I left on the table applying for a couple of other universities. So one being RMIT, and I went and I can actually remember my interview where I went and sat in with them, and they challenged me in a unique way to look at my work. So part of that was you walked through RMIT, the massive campus in the middle of Melbourne, and you saw the facilities, and just even sitting within that interview process where they have a look at your portfolio in front of you and they asked you questions, I felt in that moment it was going to be the place for me, that they were beginning to challenge me, but they didn't know me, and were starting to challenge my style of photography. And so I walked out of that interview thinking there's no way they're letting me in. They talked a lot about commercial work, and my understanding of photography was very basic. I was only relatively new to photography. I'd done a lot of workshops with photographers. I knew how cameras worked, and had no idea about editing. I'd never opened Photoshop ever.
Wow.
In fact, my first ever, Kieran Stone would hate me saying this, but Kieran, who's an exceptional photographer, showed me Photoshop one day, and he nearly put me to sleep. And it wasn't because what he was saying was boring or anything. It was just way over my head.
Yeah.
And so when I was doing some research about RMIT, I learnt that it was one of the oldest institutions of photography in the world. And they had a unique balance of practical and theory. So that was where having a look at a first year, what was all the subjects that I was going to do. A lot of it was theory. A lot of it was practical, should I say. And for me, with my background in sport, that was going to be a lot more suited for my learning style. So I think it was about 2 weeks later, I got an accepted. I was offered a spot there, and pretty much I never looked back from that point. I went into that formal education, and I always laugh that in the sporting industry, I was renowned as a perfectionist, and I felt that the course coordinator at the time was talking directly at me, because one of the first things he said when he addressed the group was, if you're a perfectionist, you need to walk back out that door. And we've always had a little bit of a laugh about that was what he said without even knowing me, but definitely they unraveled that layer of my perfectionism through study. But I guess like the way I look at it is my experience. I have a degree in sports science, and my experience from like changing careers and uni is you get out of it what you want to get out of it. And I definitely did push myself. I wasn't prepared to settle for just passing. And they talked a lot about industry standards. So in everything that I did, I pretty much pushed myself to complete every assignment to industry standard. If I wasn't happy with it, I started again. And I know I drove them nuts with that. And then quite often they were asking me to submit 2 assignments, because my first one that I ditched still would have been like a distinction or a high distinction, but it wasn't living up to my standards. So I started the process again.
Wow.
So yeah, but I learned a lot about a lot of different genres, and I actually enjoyed the theory, learning about, I guess, like the history of photography and where photography began to where it is now. And that's, I guess, expanded my horizons in technology as well, how much technology's changed and how I can use technology to my advantage, or wanting to use technology in a little bit different kind of way. And RMIT definitely put that on the table, as well as probably the biggest thing I got out of RMIT was in the last 6 months that I was there, and they knew that I was stubborn and I wanted to go down the landscape photography track. And they asked me at that time to print out the work of 15 to 20 photographers I admired, whether that be on Instagram. And so we printed off their Instagram feeds, and I came into the studio one day and my lecturer had actually hung them all on the wall with blue tack. And he asked me to take a step back and go, okay, so now you see all 20, what do you see? And the answer to that was exactly the same thing. And then in amongst that was my work, and I was falling into that trap of creating a body of work that was no different from anyone else. And that was my turning point. And that I don't think I could have got that from anywhere else apart from formal study, or I'd still be going down that path currently, oblivious to the fact that I was actually doing it. So for that, I'm really thankful to my lecturers and to RMIT for kind of challenging me and opening my eyes to the photographer that I want to be.
Yeah, no, that's great. So when you actually made the decision to go through that education process, the reasoning behind that, I assume, is not to improve your Instagram feed, but to become a professional photographer. And, is that something that, drove you after you first sort of got hold of the camera, or is that just something that came about as you started to learn more about it?
I think yes and no. It was sort of one of those things that, like, in that time off, I kind of learned what I loved about tennis was being outdoors. Like, I loved the connection, particularly with kids that I coached or athletes I developed. But if I go back to high school, I actually had the opportunity to accept a scholarship into graphic design or a scholarship into sport. And I chose sport because I couldn't see myself sitting at a computer editing whatever, which is ironic that I've come full circle. So
digital photography,
exactly. Yeah. Now I sit at a computer and edit photos, but it was kind of, it was always there. And what I sort of learned about landscape photography was I loved exploring and I loved seeing these places. And it wasn't so much about taking photos in the beginning. It was a photographer might have inspired me to go to that location, but it wasn't so much about replicating his shot. It was about going to that spot and enjoying that location and seeing it through my own eyes. And in terms of study, I did do some research before I even applied. And one of the things that I wanted to learn was why in the photographers that I was learning from, so even say Ken Duncan or even some of the other like really popular Instagram guys, none of them had gone through formal study. And would that be my point of difference? They were all self-taught. And so that was pretty much where I thought, okay, well, from my sport background, I had to have degrees. Maybe an advantage to me was to have a degree. So, and that was where I kind of went, okay, I'm going to go into formal study and see what it is that, they can offer me, and will that make me a better photographer? And I think for me, it definitely did. But I also understand that it's not suited to everybody. And like I've got people that have even done workshops with me and have asked similar questions to me. And some of them I've said, yep, this is the way to go, like formal study. And then there's some that it's just not suited to. They'd be better off learning from another photographer in a one-on-one or workshop basis. So yeah, so the big thing for me was it was really going to be my point of difference, and particularly as a female photographer, that I didn't, or I couldn't find anyone that had done well, at the time there was no one that I'd sort of found that had done formal study. So that was why I decided to go down that track.
Okay. So you mentioned, getting out and experiencing some of those locations. I guess, is that what really motivates you creatively, or is it? I guess, do you plan the experience and the shooting around that experience, or do you kind of let that flow after you actually get there? Is it a planned activity? Or a bit of both sometimes,
Yeah, sometimes it's a bit of both. So I've been fortunate the last couple of years to work for Ken Duncan as his photographic assistant. And one of the things that I've really learnt from him is to enjoy the moment and to enjoy the location. And sometimes that may mean you don't actually take your camera out of the bag.
Yep.
And quite often I will actually really enjoy sitting there with Ken will be off shooting and I'll be helping him, but I actually just enjoy sitting there in that location, almost visually exploring it. And for me, it's okay, I'm going to come back at a different time and I perhaps see something that he doesn't, definitely he's told me a lot is, sometimes in those moments you need to go back. You're never going to get the shot the first time. Don't fall into the trap of, over photoshopping a location or, replacing that sky. It's about enjoying that experience. And sometimes you might have unfinished business in locations, and that I'm a lot more open to. And so I almost visually, or I have a checklist of locations that I've been to where it just hasn't lined up. And and until recently, like even say, for example, down the South Coast, Horsehead Rock, I'd shot there 5-6 times and I'd never posted a photo because I'd never been happy with any of the photos. And until recently, I was, okay, well, I've actually got something I like now. It's not perfect, but it's getting there. And I still feel like I have unfinished business there. I need to go back. I've seen it in different lights. I know the time that I need to be there now to get the type of shot that I'm after. But I guess, Ken talks a lot about connection with the landscape, and I understand that a lot more, and that's what I love, whether it be hiking to a location just to see what it's like in different light, and I might only take a pocket camera with me, and then sometimes I'm kicking myself because the light is so good and I don't have my camera, but it's motivation to go back and see it again and to really experience it. So part of I guess like my education, so whether it be with Ken or even one of his former assistants, Glenn McKimmon, they talk a lot about what is your story, and they ask me all the time, what is my story and what is the story I'm trying to tell, and I think until I start listening to the landscape and the locations that I'm in, I need to learn how to tell that story. And probably in the last 6 months, I actually feel like it's finally clicked. It's only taken 2.5 years for that philosophy to click, but I feel like I'm now on that path. I get it. And then I guess the story that I'm trying to tell in my images, like whether it be words that accompany the image now, it's starting to make sense. And that's where I kind of feel it's part of my journey, and it's that's where I feel like I'm a work in progress. I'm a lot closer than I was a year ago, but it's only just started. All those elements have just started to click now. So yeah.
I guess in just listening to you there, one of the things that sort of comes out to me, obviously, there's photography for, I guess, documenting, an experience, for want of a better term. Now you can do that artistically, but I guess how do you transcend from just, okay, well, this is the landscape, this is the shot I took at that time in that light, etc. How do you sort of transcend from that into what somebody would call art, and in particular, really good art or great art, as opposed to, yes, it's a very nice long exposure of that sunset or that waterfall or that, seascape or whatever?
Yeah, I guess it's like also to like what conditions you see a landscape in, and like for example, I've only just posted it actually, and it's a shot of Mullumborough Point, down on the south coast, and actually Ken went to Mullumborough Point. He went to photograph the rock, and I was like, oh, I actually like the other side better. There was huge waves crashing, and the weather was absolutely terrible. It was when we had all that rain, and this storm front came in, and it was bucketing with rain, but the swell was huge, and the waves crashing into the rock was insane. And I felt I didn't go with Ken in that moment to the other side.
Sure.
And I knew the rock stack was like impressive, and I'm like, no, there was something pulling me the other way. And I think like now looking at that image, that it tells the story of that day a lot more than if I'd gone the other side. So I'm a lot more aware, I guess, of like looking at the conditions that we're in, and then like I'm never in a hurry to take a photo, and I think that's really important as well, like having patience to, whether it be like wander around, not with your camera out, but having a look at different compositions, and I guess I ask myself now, okay, does this composition tell the story of what it was like in that very moment? And then the deeper connection of that is the words that you use with it. And
Sure.
And a lot of the time, us as photographers, we forget to accompany not only the photo but the actual words with it.
I'm hopeless at writing a caption. I'm lucky. You're lucky if you get 3 or 4 words out of me.
well, I was kind of the same, and I suppose like working with different photographers, whether it be in their gallery, and seeing particularly like I want to be a landscape photographer that sells work, and
Sure.
And part of my education with Ken and his gallery and his amazing team, or whether it be chatting to Glenn McKimmon or anyone else that runs a gallery, is that when people come in and they see those pictures, they'll be deeply connected with the image itself of where it is, and it'll automatically trigger that emotional response. So I've been there. I know what that's like. Thank you so much for making me relive that memory, or it's your words. And I would watch people, particularly in my first 6 months of, working with Ken, they would come into the gallery, they'd look at the image, but then they'd read the story. And then instead of them moving on to the next image, they would then take a step back and they'd see the image in a different light. So I guess that's been one of the experiences that, well, whether it be out of formal study or anything else, I never would have seen that, and that's where I guess that's where my journey. That's always been my stumbling point. I've always struggled with the words, but I always felt like I was close in images that gave you a sense of where I was, or made you feel like you were there, but I was never quite there. And I I look at things a little bit different now, and definitely that's where I start to see that different side, and definitely the words and the story combined will make people take a second look, and then they may that may help them create a connection with your work. And then, of course, the greatest honor is if they turn around and say, hey, I'd actually love that on my wall. So and that's where I'm at, I guess, as a photographer, trying to marry the two to tell my story, and tell my story of the type of photographer I want to be, and that will give people a connection with my work that will make them want to have it on their wall.
Okay. So one of the things that I've noticed in looking through some of your work over the past few months has been some of your work, your night shoots with drones. I'm assuming you're using lights on the drones to create shapes, etc. Can you talk us through how you do that, and what it is that, I guess, got you started in thinking about that, and how that how that side of the your photography sort of came about?
So when I was studying at RMIT, I had a drone, and believe it or not, when I was studying there, and I graduated in 2018, and drones had been out for a couple of years, but they weren't very pro drones at that stage. And if I submitted a drone assignment or an image of taken with a drone, it needed to be pretty good. So, and I guess, like, I'm a technology buff. I like, a drone came out, and I, inspired by so many amazing photographers that were creating such a unique angle of locations that were such highly shot, and they really drew me in. So that got me into drones. And then, I guess, like, the next couple of years, then everybody had a drone, and then it was, okay, well, how can I do something different? And it didn't come sort of automatically. And one of the things when I first learnt photography was, so after I did the initial course at Michael's Camera Store, the next one the instructor encouraged me to do was a Melbourne night walk. And on that, he taught me how to spin orbs, and I thought that was the best thing ever, with like fairy lights in a ball, and I'm like, this is great. So I was hooked on light painting. And then the next stage came. I went and learnt from Richard Taddy, who's nightscape photography and an exceptional astrophotographer. And then it was, okay, well, how can I combine both? And then the evolution of the drone. So with the drone, I essentially bought a custom kit, a LumiCube. So I attached LumiCubes to it. You can use landing lights on it, but the landing lights can be a little bit hit and miss, and it also doesn't pump out enough light. So having two LumiCubes mounted on the drone, and you can alter the setting, is like pumps out heaps. So then it was, okay, shapes and things like that. And I'm not going to lie, the first time I tried this, I tried it at sunset or just after sunset. And my family have, thousands of acres, and there was some hay bales in a paddock, and I put up the drone, and not very high, and thought I would try it, and was just creating straight lines. And the first, like, you don't know which way you're flying your drone. You've got no idea. You can see lights, but you can't tell you if it's coming forwards or going backwards. And and I crashed the drone into a hay bale, and then I had to walk. It ended up being, the drone was about 700 meters away from me, and I'm looking for a drone in a paddock. So it's been a lot of Exactly. So then it just became, I guess, experimenting in the day with like different shapes and patterns that you can create, and then I learnt shooting at sort of last light creates nice, almost crisp shapes. So if I'd shot later, which I have a commercial license which will give me permission to shoot at night, but the shapes aren't as crisp. So, and it's just because you get more light spill. So shooting at last light, you get the much cleaner pattern because it's just the light itself rather than that spill of light. So yeah, so drones have like great features in, follow me and point of interest. So one of the things that you can do to get those nice crisp circles is point of interest. So so if it's the tree out at Batesford, you can sort of focus on the tree and then spin it around that. So that makes it quite easy. And then some of the other shapes. So squares, I tried out over our canola crop, and that's more mathematics. It's you kind of have to know how far you're flying, how far up, and then you have to go the same distance back and then drop down. So
geometry.
Yeah, exactly. So but it can be quite fun to try and get it in one exposure, and it's also incredibly frustrating. So so I can honestly say there's sometimes I'm out there and I waste all my batteries and I don't get the shot, and I walk away going, oh, like I could Photoshop it, but then I don't. So and I think like I got asked recently, I think I posted the one that I did. It was almost the perfect square over the canola and the Milky Way behind, but it wasn't quite complete. I'd actually stopped it before I thought it was connected, and someone said to me, why didn't you just Photoshop it? And I've gone, because it's not quite perfect, but that makes it real at the same time. So
the imperfection actually makes it what it is. Yeah.
Absolutely. And like if you have a look at some of my other ones with, the triangular shapes and things like that, if you zoomed in, and you will see that there are a few bumps in them. It's not quite the perfect line. So and that's okay, and I'm okay with that. So I think not having the perfections in it will make it appear more photoshopped than what it is. But definitely the key to the perfect circles is sort of that last light, and when the light can just focus on the lumicubes itself, you'll get that nice perfect circle.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess, do you see them as an exercise in creating art with the drone, as opposed to, I mean, obviously it's not, I guess, an experiential sort of photograph. It's something that you've actually created. You've had to program it and all the rest of it, but you've planned that out. You've thought about what it is that the end image that you want to create. I guess, how do you sort of see that in terms of your overall body of work?
It's definitely something that I feel like if I want to do it now, I probably have to do it now. If I wanted to create a body of work on it, because I guess like the more people start to see it, the more they replicate it and things like that. So it's one of those things that if I leave it too long, I've missed the boat. So someone else will jump in front of me and create the work, and then I'll kick myself that I wasn't more motivated. But through COVID last year in Melbourne, like we spent so much time in lockdown, and awards, I do enter awards, not necessarily to win awards. It's more for feedback, and it allows me to be a little bit more crazy with ideas. And if I submitted landscapes that I love into awards, they're not going to do any well. So I've got to think outside the square and give, I guess, like judges and the industry something different to look at. So one of the ideas that I came up with through lockdown was I had access to landscape that was such impacted by drought. And so I created a series of images which was based around alchemy, which is earth symbols. So I did air, earth, water, and fire. And so the one that I did with fire, the huge fire, that's on my farm. So I had my dad bundle all this rubbish that we wanted to get rid of, and we bundled it in the middle of our paddock and lit it up. And I'm surprised the drone came back to me because, man, it was hot. So we put so much stuff on it. I thought we were going to melt the drone midair, and we couldn't get anywhere near it. So, but so I did that one, and we had dry river beds not far from us in Ballarat, so the cracked earth, and we'd go out and scout them through the day and then know that we had to be there like at sunset or that sort of thing. So I guess it was me starting to create a series that explored that, and it was, okay, well, how can I do fire? Well, I've got to build a fire. So and then earth, okay, I needed cracked earth and to show the impact of drought, or water, I had to wait for Trentham Falls to be really pumping. And what better way than stand at one of Victoria's most impressive waterfalls and shoot it in a completely different way and things like that. So there was a lot of planning, but it was also fun to kind of to try these things, and not all the shots came together on the, at the perfect time. So I needed clear skies to get, I didn't want like Milky Ways, but I wanted to see stars and things like that. So it was a lot of planning, and if I got it wrong, I had to wait for the next perfect time. So low moon or almost no moon, clear skies. And then the other big thing is wind. So to paint those perfect kind of shapes. So yeah, there was a lot of planning, but when you're in lockdown for 9 months in Victoria, you got a lot of time to replan and think about how you can go back and shoot those again. Definitely. So it started out as four sort of images, and then it's, I guess, like going to different locations. So one of them is out near Mount Arapiles. I think it's called Midas Rock, and it's just this random rock that's just sticking out of the middle of some farmer's crop. So all the way around it is wheat crops and canolas across the road, and there's this impressive rock. And I'm like, we went out to pick up a header, like machinery, and I made Dad pull over on the side of the road, wait until and we took some shots, and then we left. So we actually caught up to the machinery before we got home, but it was kind of, that was, I guess, like that was more spontaneous. It was okay, everything lined up, or shooting out at Lone Tree. That was wanting to create something different that nobody had sort of seen at Lone Tree. I don't want to create the same images as everyone else now, and that was a way that I could light up the rock but capture the sun as it was coming up and at first light, and just give a different feel to an image to a place that is shot so often.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, growing up in the farm and everything, do you think that has influenced how you've gone about your photography? And I don't just mean, yes, you're obviously going to shoot the local landscape because you shoot near where you live. Most people do anyway. But do you think that has influenced more around your style and the types of images that you're trying to create, or do you not feel that at all? I guess
like I've wanted to create images of the farm that people hadn't seen before, and I guess like I consider myself really fortunate that through that time that I was actually, taking the break from tennis, I had a landscape at my doorstep. I didn't have to travel anywhere. I could walk out the back door and shoot whatever I wanted, and it just so happened that it was a time when it was about springtime and there's canola in flower, and then of course with that is your summer storm. So I wanted to be out shooting lightning or trying to shoot lightning or figuring my way around that or things like that. I think the farm definitely gave me an opportunity to perfect my technical ability as a photographer, and I really did challenge, I guess, myself technically in wanting to know all the settings and walking into a location and knowing exactly how I want to shoot it. And to do that, I had to understand the camera. So, and there was a lot of failure. I'm not going to lie. There was a lot of failure. So but you would walk away and go, oh, I can't believe I did that. But if I'd been just going out on weekends and doing that same sort of process, I might not have the opportunity to learn from those mistakes as quickly as I did. But like I guess like the farms also, it's given me an understanding more of, I suppose like the landscape, but rural life, and talking to my dad, and my dad's probably got a better eye for farm photography than what I do. It quite often that I'm here on the farm and he'll ring me up and say, did you see that sunset? And I'm like, no, I'm sitting editing an image. So
not looking out the window.
No, I'm not looking out the window. So, and then I'll look out the window and go, oh, like that was a good one, or that sort of thing. So, but I guess in the beginning, I was trying to make farm images too complicated, and now I probably think about it more in simplicity. Simplicity is king, and I suppose like you can probably start to see that in my style again. I'm not really going to really complicated compositions. It's simplicity, and I think that's what the farms taught me, to communicate that kind of story. Sometimes the more simple it is, it communicates your message better. And it's all about composition. So, and thinking of unique ways that you can compose an image, and having access to that kind of landscape definitely gives you more practice to be able to experiment with composition and then find your style. On top of that. So I'm really grateful for the farm.
I guess what are you looking for when you're looking at those compositions? You mentioned simplicity, but what are the elements that you're after, I guess?
Sometimes I don't even know. So like I took one, like literally I was traveling. I just got my border pass, heading back to Melbourne. 110 Ks on the freeway, and the only thing I was thinking was, like I'm 2 weeks late for canola on our farm. And I'm driving through like the farming communities on the Hume, and they've all just finished, and I come across this one paddock at Gundagai that has a hill, pretty much one tree on a hill, blue skies, and I'm like, will I stop? And then I'm like, nah, I'm going to keep going. But then I stopped, and then I took the photo with, which for me would be a wide angle, and I'm having a look at the back of the camera, just going, it's just not working. So hunting through my car looking for my telephoto, and the only one I could find was my 70 to 200. And I'm thinking, it's not it's not enough, but it works. And then, like, in that process of looking for another lens, this one white puffy cloud decides it's going to plonk itself dead smack over the tree, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that works. And then, like, out of the corner of the screen, like, I see, like, oh, I've got lens spots. What are those marks? And then realize, oh, it's a flock of birds. Like, I never would have seen that before. Like, sometimes a composition just sort of comes to you. You're not kind of expecting it. Or, like, if it was even the other night, like, we had storms here, I walked out into the paddock not really sure what I was going to photograph. And I tend to wander around and kind of look for elements. What's my foreground to start with, and then what do I want to be the hero in the image? So, whether it's clouds or something specific or movement, and then it's, okay, well, how can I pare this back? So is it too complicated? Take a photo, have a look at it on the back of the camera, but the benefit of digital. Don't know how they did it in film. So, but have a look at the composition and kind of go, okay, does it work? Is it too complicated? How can I make it more simple? And it might be experimenting with different lenses and some of it, or different focal lengths. So, and quite often that's what I experiment with, switching from portrait to landscape, or shooting at different focal lengths. And when I come back and have a look at them on the screen, there'll be one that'll straight away jump out, and it'll kind of go, okay, that one tells the story more so than another. Yeah. So I'd love to say that I plan to be in a location at a specific time, but in terms of compositions, a lot of the time, no, I don't really know. And I try not to look at Instagram and other people's photos to see what they're shooting, because if I do that, I'll kind of be led to what they're shooting. And I want to create something a little bit different. So, and if I'm not influenced, I'm probably more likely to. So, yeah.
Okay. So do you have a favourite spot that you just keep wanting to return to, whether or not you do return to it?
Yeah, I live not far from the Otways. So, and it's one of those places that when I was a tennis coach, I'd never actually visited the Otways. And one of my best memories in photography was heading down for the first time. I think I went on a workshop I went in twice in, I think it was about 6 weeks. The first time I went with Adam Dyson and Pete James, and then about a month later I went with Kieran Stone, and that was the spot. It was after walking into say, for example, Hopeton Falls for the first time, and looking at Hopeton Falls, I'm like, wow, I want to be a photographer. Yeah. So I definitely have this deep connection with the Otways. I love the green, I love the water, and I don't even have to take photos, and I have a similar kind of feel, and it's similar is Mount Field National Park for the same sort of reasons, like not so much Russell Falls, but Horseshoe Falls, and I could literally sit at Horseshoe Falls all day and just watch that water, and I feel like that's always my place. And the same with the Otways, to just reset my focus, and if I feel like I'm starting to lose focus or losing my way in photography a bit, I always walk away from those locations just feeling inspired again, and I'll walk away with a different kind of image, and then that almost breaks that creative block. So I try to visit there as much as I can, and I did have a trip lined up at the end of last year to go to Tassie again, but with COVID and borders, it was cancelled. But and was definitely looking at looking for an adventure in rafting down the Franklin to follow in the footsteps of Dromboscus. And I didn't care if I didn't take a photo. I just wanted to go. So apart from the lure of adventure and whitewater rafting and all that sort of thing that kind of, was very enticing. But, I think like it's hard not to be inspired by Tassie or,
particularly that southwest region, which is just so, I guess it's uninhabited. It's just so rugged and as pristine as almost any wilderness on earth, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see like images by the likes of Luke Sharkey and that sort of thing. And I don't want to go there to replicate their shots. It's like they could drop me in without a camera and I'd be quite happy to just explore and that sort of thing. Like, if I wanted to create the same image as theirs, I'd just buy their shot. They've done it. So
that's it, and
have it on the wall to continue to inspire me. But definitely I look at their images and just go, wow, like they're just incredible. Yeah, absolutely. The Tarkine and places like that. And Karanjini, like I have this, I feel like I've got unfinished business at Karanjini. It's the first workshop I did with Ken Duncan, and I walked away from that just going, wow, this place is in Australia. Nobody's ever heard of it. I know people have heard of it a little bit more now, but it's one of those places that you just have to go see. It's incredible beyond means.
Haven't got there.
It's still on your list. I'm dying to get there next year. So I think I'll just about I would hazard a guess I'll be there next year. So I've been putting it off for a few years. I guarantee that I'll be back there next year.
I guess when you're going back to places like the Otways and so forth, do you find the familiarity with those places helps you find new compositions and new ways of shooting? You mentioned Horseshoe Falls, and as you said, yes, you could sit there and just watch the water, but if you get your camera out, do you find having been there many times helps you find those new those different compositions, or do you find that sort of hampers you a little bit because it's kind of like there's certain angles that Hopeton Falls, for example, looks absolutely fantastic at. There's others where it looks it's a waterfall, a nice waterfall, but the composition and the shots are ordinary. How do you sort of go about that, and how does it help having been there so often, or does it hinder?
I think for me, it definitely is an advantage. Like, I don't ever feel like I walk away from shooting at, say, Hopeton, feeling like I've got the shot.
Yep.
I always walk away going, oh, I was so close, or I've done it so many times where you'll shoot and you'll make a rookie mistake. And you're so overwhelmed by your surroundings that you just go, how on earth did I make that mistake? And I've stuffed the shot. Like, you know that your composition's good, the conditions were right, but you just make a mistake, and that kind of inspires you to go back again and again. And I've seen Hopeton pumping that you can't get anywhere near it, where you feel like you're going to get like blown into the water, and then I've seen it with nearly no water, and each time it's unique. And the other benefit is seeing it in different light. And like, I've shot it early in the morning, I've shot it at midday, I've shot it late afternoon, and each time it's different. And how much water's going over makes a big difference too to the ambience and things like that. So has a set of trees fallen down, and that gives you a unique perspective, and it changes so much that I feel like I could shoot there, every week for a year and walk away with different shots sort of every time. And I suppose like my style originally was I wanted to be as close as I could to it. And then as I'm developing my style, I'm actually moving further and further and further away from it, because I feel like that's telling the story more. So even that learning process is changing the type of image that I'm trying to create. And then you've got your other variables, such as like early when I was shooting, it was, they taught me long exposure, and I was obsessed with long exposure, and you had to shoot waterfalls.
Yeah.
Absolutely, like 20 to 30 seconds was the goal. Like, and if you had someone like Tassie Grammar who says a long exposure it's not a long exposure unless it's 3 minutes. So of course I had to experiment with 3-minute exposures of opening balls
and pen stopper on.
Exactly. So I kind of feel like, and now it's shorter. So like now I'm around, a quarter of a second. I'm capturing the movement in the water. Like there's so many elements that can make it different. And I really admire the guys. Like I follow the guys like Craig Richards and that shoot it all the time. And I love it when they come up with something new. It's like, yes, there's a new shot there, or or different technology. And one that I actually really love was from Oat, who's Hanging Pixels, and I think he used like a 3D camera, and he created this orb of Hopeton Falls, and I'm like, wow, that's like super cool. So I think, like, depending on what you shoot with, you don't have to go out and get the newest technology, but like I love the guys that are really creative, and there's plenty of different shots, and so different light, and I think you can shoot Hopeton a million different ways and end up with something completely different each time. And then you've got other waterfalls all through the Otways that, some of them haven't even been explored. And, I'd be quite happy for them to dump me in the Otways for 3 months and give me a little GPS and a tent and go exploring. And I'd be happy. I'd be,
like Adam Dyson's waterfall project, where he was aiming to shoot so many waterfalls in the year or in that period, and like that was incredible, and I loved that he challenged himself to do that. Very envious that he saw some incredible places, and but would I replicate the similar project he did? No, I'm actually more curious for him to finish it, and then hopefully I hope that he creates a book, so that we can sort of inspire the next generation.
No, I think that'd be a great idea, and I think anyone that knows Adam or has his Instagram, send him a DM and ask him to make a book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll definitely be on him about that. So but like I think by the time he's finished, there's going to be no doubt that the images that he creates are so unique, and they're not snaps, that they really are work of art. And I love, like, there's no greater feeling than opening up Instagram and there's a brand new waterfall from Adam sitting there, and something that little bit unique, and a new perspective that you haven't seen, and that really gets me excited about photography, like to see something new.
Definitely. What's the most memorable experience you've had out shooting?
I was really fortunate a few years ago to go out with Ken out to Hart's Bluff, and Ken is very much about giving back to giving back. So whether that's spending time with photographer, like spending time out in community, donating his time or whatever it might be. And he took me out to a place called Hart's Bluff, which is out in the middle of nowhere. It's 2.5 hours out of Alice Springs, and you drive through the West MacDonald Ranges, past Mount Sonder, and some of the most incredible landscape. And you head out to a rural community of Indigenous Aboriginals, and that, without a doubt, was the most rewarding experience I've had, whether I took photos or not. And to get to know them and then hear their story of the landscape and what the landscape means to them, for me, that was also part of my learning experience, learning to be connected more to the landscape and how they talk about the landscape and their stories. And they communicate those stories, whether it be through art or music or whatever it might be. And and they would, I had the opportunity to go out without Ken as well. And a lot of the elder women took me under their wing, and they took me to some locations that mean a lot to them. And like, the locations are amazing, like patterns in rocks and hills, and then they're telling me the story of the landscape, and I'm like, wow, I need to go back. Like, I can't wait to go back and photograph that landscape and tell their story. So that would be without doubt the most rewarding experience. And then teaching them photography. So I've had no greater experience in photography really than taking a group of girls that had never touched a camera before out. We go out on top of a hill and challenge them. We give them the basics of how to shoot. They got these little Lumixes, and like, we're there to help them. But okay, now photograph what you see. You come back. And for people that have never touched a camera before, and their images were incredible. And then we took them back to the Creative Technology Centre and showed them how to basic edit in Lightroom. And then the rewarding experience was them then printing their work. And they were so proud. Like, it was like, wow, I've got something tangible. And then we printed not only a copy for them, but we printed a copy for the centre. And they didn't understand what we were doing to start with. We said, you have to sign it. So sign it and date it. And we hung them up. So the next time they came in, their prints were on the wall. And then they wanted to tell their friends and their aunties and their uncles. And then all of a sudden we had all these people coming into the Creative Technology Centre to see their work that they were so proud of. And there'll be nothing that will ever compare to that sort of moment, like teaching.
What a great experience. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and just something so simple as printing, like, meant the world to them. And for us to go, that's amazing, and we want to hang it up within our space. That was incredible. And then they made me print some of my crazier drone kind of photography. They were fascinated by the drone. And the minute I left, apparently they very quickly came in and took my prints off the wall, and they hung them in their houses. So I kind of thought that was a win-win too. So that was quite nice. So,
aside from your camera and your lenses, what piece of kit can't you live without? Probably
my filters to a certain extent. So particularly a polarizer. So I use a polarizer pretty much almost on a daily basis. So depending on what type of photography that I'm doing, so whether it's architecture or anything like that. So probably a polarizer. That's probably like slightly obscure to what everyone else would say, I'm sure, but definitely, a polarizer would be my essential piece of my kit.
Fair enough. So what's the plan when you're finally out of your self-imposed lockdowns, or are you just going to move to another state that's been locked down?
Well, I've got to go back to New South Wales sort of towards the end of the month, but I'm definitely hoping that I can sort of get out and take some photos while I'm back in Melbourne. So I've been really fortunate. Like, I had the mandatory 14-day quarantine here, and if I was quarantining in suburbia, it would be pretty hard. But being on the farm, you've got acres and acres to walk around in, and
that you're not going to meet anyone else. So yeah.
Exactly, and that's been good, because it's kind of given me the opportunity to see what's changed on the farm, and find some different compositions and things like that, and some ideas of how I can shoot. I just need better weather is the big one. It's poured here of late, and it's definitely been some crazy weather since I've been back. But then, like, heading back up to the Central Coast, so towards the end of the month, heading back to work with Ken, and I'm definitely looking forward to shooting. So shooting anything. So but I would love to sort of coincide with a weekend in the Blue Mountains. So if I can swing that, I'd make a slight detour, and I'd love to explore. And again, like, not necessarily taking photos, but just exploring some of the different aspects of the Blue Mountains. And I'm blown away by so many people's images of the Blue Mountains that I just want to see it for myself. I want to see how grand that landscape is, and have that connection, and then maybe at some point in time come back and do some of my own photography. But just enjoy it, I guess. So and that's what I'd be looking for for the rest of the year anyway.
Oh, fantastic. So are there any new projects on the cards once you get out, or is it just get up to the Central Coast and the Blue Mountains? Or
probably the biggest project for me at the moment is printing my work. So I've been given a challenge that I have to present when I go back to the Central Coast, a portfolio of work that I'm happy with. So so that's a bit of a challenge in itself. So do I just do landscape, or do I cross that over with commercial work, or that sort of thing? But I've got a couple of weeks to sort of work that out, and I'm really privileged to sort of have some great mentors within the industry that I can sort of have a chat to, whether it's Zoom, and present their work. So I'll reach out to an industry professional like Sally Brownbill, who's quite often a judge on a lot of the awards. Yep. And she has no connection with me apart from RMIT, but show her a lot of my work and go, okay, well, what do you think that I would have in my portfolio? And then maybe reaching out to some of my former lecturers at RMIT, or people in Melbourne that I admire, and kind of say to them, okay, well, this is my portfolio, now give me some tough love. So I'm quite content for them to give me as much tough love as they want. It'll just spur me on. But I think the greatest critic in my portfolio will be Ken, and until I haven't shown him a lot of my work, and he's into Instagram, but I don't think he follows me, or I've made sure he doesn't follow me, so he doesn't see. But it's almost that purposeful thing. Like, I respect him greatly, but it's kind of that nervousness of showing him my work and kind of going, what do you think? So I think Glenn McKimmon when Glenn worked for Ken, and he told me some stories about how he printed some of his work and showed Ken, and Ken was brutally honest with him. I think that scared me from ever wanting to show Ken some of my stuff. So, but yeah, like I think once I've got I feel like I've created some stuff in the last sort of 12 months, particularly with COVID and having time to go through images that have been in that ever growing to do pile. And I feel like I've got a stronger body of work that, now I've got to fire up the printer. And part of study was you had to create a portfolio, and I haven't updated since study, so it'll be ditching all those old ones and printing some work and maybe even releasing some new prints if I'm happy with the prints that I print out. So
are you printing
so that'll be the
yourself?
So I've got an Epson printer at home, so I'll be doing some A2 prints and things like that. But in terms of my work that I sell, I work with a couple of great print labs, one in Melbourne and Created for Life in Sydney, and they do an incredible job. And I think it's too hard to print all your work on a larger scale, but definitely every time I pick up prints from Created for Life, I go, wow, I just should print my work more often. And there's no greater feeling than seeing your work printed.
Oh, absolutely. And particularly in large scale, I've been doing quite a few large scale acrylic prints recently.
Oh, yeah.
They're hideously expensive, but I personally think really worth it. If you get something that's 1.5 meters wide and meter tall, and it's one of your favourite waterfalls or a seascape or a landscape or whatever, and you whack that on the wall. I don't think there is a better feeling, to be honest. I print a lot of books as well for myself. I don't publish them or try to sell them. I just create them for myself. Usually they're kind of a mix of holiday and more artistic, photography when I'm on holidays or something. But so I personally think printing your work is really one of the things that every photographer should be doing. I mean, we're making millions of images, each of not each a million, but we are making millions of these images which just sort of sit around on hard disks or in the cloud. Absolutely. Or on Instagram or whatever. But if you're not printing, I think you're shortchanging yourself, because once you actually see your work in print, and particularly in a larger scale, it becomes something, as you said, it becomes something tangible that you can look at, feel, and remind yourself of that experience that you had.
Yeah, absolutely. And through uni, I was very fortunate that we had to do essentially work experience, and I went and worked in a print lab. I went and worked at CPL Digital, and they print Mark Bray's work and Tom Putt's work and on the large scale. And we, in my time there, Darren, who was a master printer, would go, oh, we're printing Mark's work today, or we're printing Tom's, and I think I was more excited with them coming out than when Mark and Tom were coming to pick them up. Like it was wow, I'm getting to see these huge prints, and like on Fujiflex, like before they went off for face mounting and things like that. And they were just incredible, and I love looking at other photographers' work, and I've got work on my walls, not my own work. I've got photographers that inspire me, and I think that was the big game changer for me as a photographer. Like to have photography from, like, to own a Ken Duncan, or to own a Glenn McKimmon print or Tom Putt or whoever, and look at those on a daily basis and have that as the fuel. Hey, I want to create something to that standard. I felt that was really important, and it did. Like it the minute I put up my first print that wasn't my own, it made my work look so inferior. I wanted to pull all my own work down, but it was definitely inspiring. And the one that I bought of Ken's it wasn't the one that I wanted. I walked into his gallery the first time, and he has this amazing leopard shot, and it was huge in the gallery. Like it was 50 inches squared. And I remember walking in and going, wow, the eyes got you. And Ken was there, and he talked me into buying the giraffes out in Africa. And I'm like, why am I buying the giraffes? And he goes, no. He goes, this is the investment piece. And well, as it turns out, it probably is. It's almost sold out, and it's an incredible image, and it has grown on me over time. But all it did in the beginning was made me want to go and buy a phase one, because I kind of figured early in the piece that, wow, to succeed in photography, you need a phase one. So little did I know that's changed a little bit, as we've gone on. But definitely it was having that on my wall and walking past it on a daily basis going, man, I want to create something that good. And yeah, now I've added to the collection. I do have the leopard, and I love the leopard. So, but I also know that what he went through to get the leopard, and I admire the story as much as I admire the image. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely. So, are there any photographers out there that you think I should be talking to? I'm always on the lookout for new people to bring onto the podcast, and I already have a very long list, but
I think like a really interesting guy is Richard Taddy. So like what he does, like with nightscape photography, he's massively popular. So but he's a genuinely great guy. And I know there's like a lot of photographers out there. They're great photographers, but to be great people as well, and be really keen to share their knowledge and help you on your journey. I used to look at what led me to Richard was essentially how he could turn such a mundane object, a rust bucket, into a work of art, and in the way that he lit it and things like that. Yeah, I think he's a super interesting character, and definitely someone that you should maybe look at. So yeah,
definitely I'll add him to the list.
But another one is I don't know if you've had him, is Glenn McKimmon. So
I haven't had Glenn on, but
genuinely
he is
great
actually
guy
on my list already. So yeah.
Oh, there you go. So genuinely great guy, really humble, and just the knowledge about the photographic industry is incredible. And I love. I probably learn more from Glenn than anyone else. Like our mundane conversations where it's literally 5-10 minutes. I walk into Created for Life and he'll say to me, hey, Watto, have you seen, or whatever, and he'll show me something that he's seen, or vice versa. Oh, did you see this? And we're probably we're a similar kind of age, and I suppose like he's interested in the technology and that sort of thing. But yeah, what he's done for the industry is incredible.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, I'll certainly bump him up the list then, so I get to him.
Yeah, no, give him a hard time and tell him that he's got to do it. So, and if he doesn't, I'll give him a hard time for you.
Fair enough. Sounds good. I might get you to do my recruiting for me.
So no, like I don't think you'll have a hard time like with Glenn. He's he's genuinely really passionate about the industry and about other photographers, and and I don't think I've met anyone really as passionate about the photographic industry as Glenn. So no, I think he'd be a great one. But yeah, Richard equally is a genuinely great guy, and so the other one I don't know if you had is Oat, so Van Boone, who's Hanging Pixels. So he's really interesting, and some of the stuff that he does is incredible.
I'm really impressed with his work, and he's been on my list for a little while. Again, it's just timing wise, trying to fit everybody in, and
absolutely, yeah. No,
I think I'll be doing this for a very long time.
Yeah, it's sort of like, like once you start, like I even like talking to the girls like Steph and Serena, they go, wow, our list just keeps getting longer and longer and longer. Absolutely. So, and I'm like, there's just so many, everybody's story is different, and I think that's the part that's unique. And like I think I said to you in the beginning, every podcast that I listen to, I always walk away with something completely different. And even I was listening to Dylan Toe. I don't know if you watched Nisi's one last night. Like I walked away from that going, like I was driving at one stage and I had it playing like just through the phone, and I went, wow, like I've never actually thought about, like I quite often bracket. I'd never actually thought about ISO bracketing, and like because you set your camera to bracket and it exposure brackets. It doesn't ISO bracket.
It's automatic.
And I was like, wow, I have never thought about that. So of course I had to go out today and go, I'm going to put this to the test. And so I walked away from that going, I didn't even learn that at uni.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like,
I was listening to another one a few weeks ago, and I forget who it was, but they were actually talking about color correction using the tones adjustment layers in Photoshop, and there's multiple algorithms that you can actually choose from if you hold down your Alt key or your Option key to select them,
which I use,
which I never knew about.
Hidden.
I mean, because they're hidden. I hidden, just never knew about them, and I was like, oh wow, okay, there's something I didn't know.
That was like the game changer for me, and I'd never used Photoshop going into uni, and I can remember like, well, the joke is, and I still have this joke with like, even like people that I teach, I failed my first Photoshop assignment, and that was like my kick in the ass. It was the only assignment I ever failed, and well, I had to resubmit it, but that was the lowest mark I ever got. And then I went from failing an assignment to compositing like an hourglass and I learned heaps about Photoshop, and it was in something that I was doing there. It was like, oh, when there's a hidden panel in Photoshop that will actually help you with color correcting your landscapes. All you have to do is hold down Option and then Auto, and it appears. And I've been using that ever since. So, but it's amazing like how many people don't know that it's there.
That's the thing. There's so many little hidden bits and pieces that.
Oh, absolutely.
Unless you actually, have the time or somebody shows it to you, it's amazing. I mean, one of my favourite sort of video. I'm largely self-taught on both photography but also processing. Is the F64 Academy. I don't know if you've ever seen any of their videos, but he gets really in depth, and he has a deep understanding about how the algorithms work and how the color management in Photoshop works. And it's just, I just sit there open-jawed sometimes, just looking at different ways of doing things that as I say, they're kind of hidden away because they're behind an alt and a menu option, or
absolutely.
a shift and a menu option or whatever. And unless you know that magic key combination, you're never going to find it.
Yeah, well, I even with other photographers that I assist, I talk in shortcuts, and then they're like, no, don't tell me the shortcut. They're like, show me how to do it. And I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do it. So then I end up writing them this long list of shortcuts. Yeah. So I have a laugh about that, but I showed a photographer, I can't remember if it was Ken or someone else. I showed them that option thing, and they were like, so why is that hidden? And I've gone, I don't know. So I use it all the time.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's kind of an obscure, The thing that taught me is I'm now, I haven't done it yet, but I'm now planning to go and hit Alt or Control or Shift or whatever, just and tap on buttons to see if there's something hidden behind them.
Yeah, well, it's like I was saying to someone the other day, I was helping them with masking, and I'm like, oh, so if you command click your mask, it selects it with magic dots, but if you option click, it turns it to black and white.
Yeah.
And you can actually see how bad your masking is.
Yeah.
Well, that was a game changer for them, and they're like, well, why is that hidden?
Yeah, why is that so obscure? Yeah. That's the thing. There's so many arcane pieces that you've really got to go through and be shown what those little tricks and tips are to be able to pick it up.
Well, I actually think the person who taught me about that, now that I think about it, I think was Adam Williams. So I was actually at uni, and Adam was a co-photographer with Ken in a boot camp, and I sat at the back of the room. They were all learning how to process, and I was at uni. I knew how to process, and I had uni assignments, and I'm compositing at the back of the room, and I knew of Adam, but I didn't really know Adam, and I still laugh about it now. He goes, oh, what are you doing? And I've gone, oh, I'm compositing. And I've gone, oh, I'm stuck compositing. Do you know anything about compositing? I didn't know that he was a Photoshop expert at that point. And so I had a bit of a laugh about that. But I think he was the one who told me about the option, auto. And that was, game changer. So I said, oh, that was the one thing that I took out of Coastal Exposure, was all these hidden things in Photoshop. So it was good.
I've only got one more question for you, and for some that have been listening to the podcast for a little while, they know this is the most important question that I ask. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
I do, yes. So I am a big fan of Hawaiian pizza. So yes, definitely. So and I have to be, I'll give you another tip. You have to be working for Ken, because Ken would eat pizza 7 days a week, and it is always ham and pineapple. So so definitely, if I didn't like ham and pineapple pizza, I don't think he'd allow me to work for him. I do love ham and pineapple pizza.
Fantastic. Well, Dani, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and it's been really interesting to sort of hear your journey and where you've come from and how you do what you do. Where can people find your work?
So I guess the largest portion of my work is probably Instagram. So whether that's Dani Watson AU for my landscape photography work, or if they want to see a little bit of the more obscure and sometimes more commercial kind of stuff, it's dani.watson.au. So there I kind of show a little bit more diversity in my photography. So either one of those, it's a wide spectrum all the types of photography that I'm into, and sometimes the weird and wacky stuff.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks again, Dani, and thanks everyone for listening to Landscape Photography World. Hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening, because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work and this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.